anything positive about Israel that we could find. We put it into 30-second videos, and we targeted young people of these demographics. That was for 3 weeks, and then we did the survey again. And the question that we asked when we did the survey again is, do you recall seeing an ad that we had put in front of these people? And a third of them did recall it, which is a very high recall rate. And what we found was that in 3 weeks, which is very little time, and a very small investment of $10,000 per location with paid promotion, basically we shifted the 50% who were favorable towards Israel to 74%. 20%, that 20% that we were missing in the beginning, was actually taken from the indifferent lot that went down to 20%. And the 9% who were against Israel went down to about 6%. So what we found was that when you bring positive, relevant, attractive content about Israel, that is not necessarily about what these people owe us and what they need to do and what's going on in Israel, just put it in their minds that Israel is a country that's very similar to what they want to experience and very relevant to their lives. It was very easy to shift their perception. And that's what I'm here to say, because we, the people who love Israel, there's a saying in Hebrew, Al tiyeh chacham, al tiyeh tzodek, tiyeh chacham. Don't be smart, don't be right, be smart. Okay, it's a very well-known saying. And basically, we are all right. Okay, we're all right. Everything's not okay about how people treat Israel and the Israeli people and the Jewish people overall. But if we want to be smart about it, there may be other ways of changing this very dangerous trend, which is really moving into anti-Semitism, which is very, very worrying. So we need to maybe open our minds to different ways of approaching it.
So Joanna, based on your surveys and the results, what would you recommend to the Israeli government?
So there's a statistic that from Facebook in 2019 that people every day, young people every day, when they're scrolling through their social media feeds, they scroll the height of the Statue of Liberty. That's how much time they're spending on their social media feeds. And that was 2019. So by now it would be the Burj Khalifa, okay, after COVID. And my recommendation is, if when young people are scrolling through their social media feeds, they're not seeing anything positive, attractive, and relevant about Israel that makes them stop and pay attention, then we are going to continue to see this downward spiral. So my recommendation, and this is what we do, and we would recommend it to the Israeli government, is to invest much more heavily in targeting young people, getting content out there, digital content on social media. We don't have to have everybody come to Israel, even though that's the best way to change perceptions. It can easily be done on social. It's just a question of money, unfortunately, or fortunately. The money is there. It's the mindset that needs to change.
It's a little bit good news, bad news. Itamar, you've been doing this for maybe a quarter of a century or more. And tell us about what seems to be black and white. Two questions. First of all, it's very clear what they do, and it's very obvious what they do on their social media and their public statements. Why doesn't the media generally pick up on this and tell us what you see as Palestinian anti-Semitism?
Okay, why doesn't the media pick up? That's, of course, the fantastic challenge. What we at Palestinian Media Watch do, because a lot of the media is very hesitant to go beyond the accepted politically correct narrative, what we do at Palestinian Media Watch is we go directly to the governments, to the parliaments, and as I mentioned before, it's a constant travel, constant meeting, Foreign Affairs Committee here, Foreign Affairs Committee there, and let the governments see directly by themselves. Now, we need the media. The media very often will demand of a government to take action on material that Palestinian Media Watch has exposed. So we really have to get more into the media. Why do they hesitate? Again, I really believe that there is a politically correct narrative. Journalists who might come from a foreign country and all of a sudden present the Israeli side might find that they may need a new job. There is a certain position, a certain political correctness, a certain wokeness today that's out there that includes anti-Israel sentiment, and a journalist who wants to go against that, I think, is going out on a limb. So that's the challenge that we have to get beyond. Now, I want to talk a moment, you asked about Palestinian anti-Semitism, and I'll start with a story. Back in the days of the Obama administration, the Obama government established for the first time, a special representative to deal with anti-Semitism. And the first person who got this position was Hannah Rosenthal. Her office was right, literally, a few doors away from Hillary Clinton, Secretary of State. And she was a wonderful person. She was very concerned. And my next trip to Washington, I scheduled a meeting with her, and I went in and I showed her the whole range of Palestinian anti-Semitism, its various components, all the different categories of the IRA that it's violating. And she was horrified. And I said to her at the end, okay, now what can you do about this? What can we do about this? And she answered, I can't do anything about it because the State Department has told me to deal with anti-Semitism in every place around the world except the Palestinian Authority. And this was because, as far as, she didn't say this, but I'm saying this was because if the problem of the Palestinians and Israel is their hatred of Jews and anti-Semitism, then they have to change. The State Department's policy was the problem is territory. That means Israel has to give something. And I think for that reason, the State Department would not even let her look into Palestinian anti-Semitism. And for years, we kept in touch, and she kept trying, and she kept trying, and she never succeeded. I don't know what the situation is today. I'm going to try as soon. There's a new person in this position now. And next trip to Washington, I hope to meet her and see if we can if there's been progress and and a willingness to deal with real anti-Semitism. Now, why is this so critical? We at PMW are convinced that everybody knows there's a massive, massive rise in anti-Semitism around the world. We are convinced that the source of this anti-Semitism is the Palestinian Authority. Because every hate message that we've seen around the world on any campus we've been hearing, we heard for years beforehand on the Palestinian Authority. They've been disseminating. You know, we say in Hebrew, Ki mitzion tetzei Torah, from Zion comes forth Torah. Well, from Zion also comes forth the anti-Semitism around the world. Not from the Zionists, but from here, the Palestinian Authority has this vicious anti-Semitism, and they are disseminating it around the world, and they keep hammering it, and then it finally sets in. If anyone wants to deal with world anti-Semitism, it has to be dealt with at the core, and the PA's anti-Semitism has to be delegitimized. I want to give you just one example of how horrific this anti-Semitism is, and this is from a speech that was made September 30th, 2022, just now, a few months ago, by no one less than Mahmoud Abbas's personal advisor on Islam. He was also appointed by Abbas to be the head of the Sharia courts. His name is Mahmoud al-Abbas, the senior, most important religious figure in the PA. And what did he say on TV? He said that when Jews visit the Temple Mount, he defined the Jews as grazing herds of humanoids, people or creatures that Allah created in the form of humans. Allah cursed them. He made them apes and pigs. And when they visit the Al-Aqsa Mosque is prey to humanoids. Jews are less than human. This is coming from the top of the Palestinian Authority. Now, if it was Jewish behavior, we could fix it. But if we're less than humans, there's nothing we can do about that. Now, the world should have been outraged. Had an Israeli said that African Americans are apes and pigs, humanoids, something like that, my God, every newspaper in the world would have covered this. This is top figure in the Palestinian Authority. And it's an outrage. We send this material to all the journalists. It got very, very little exposure. It's tragic, and it gets back to your original thing. Why isn't the media doing it? And I think this just doesn't fit their narrative that the top religious official in the PA is this vicious anti-Semite appointed by Abbas. What do we do about it? It doesn't fit their narrative. They're going to let it slide. Yeah.
First of all, if you have any questions in the last few minutes, we'll be taking a few questions. But Adam, you were shaking your head there. Tell us what you're thinking.
Well, just first, before I continue, I just wanted to mention something I missed in my intro, and that is that Camera has a large Christian media department. I thought that would be relevant to this audience. We fight back against anti-Israel bias in the Christian media, as well as pushing back against increasingly hostile environment within certain church denominations. But I wanted to mention that you can't really understand modern anti-Semitism without understanding these modern radical ideologies which posit that there are good and evil. It posits that there are people that are powerful and people that are less powerful. And once you place the Palestinians in this category of victims only, that they are the weak and they're being oppressed by powerful Jewish Israelis, it becomes, I think, axiomatic for media outlets to cover the conflict in a way that expresses sympathy for Palestinians. It is almost a shortcut around actual doing the hard work of reporting, right? Because if you go to the region convinced that my job is to advocate on behalf of the victims, what's that adage, you know, conflicting the powerful and afflicting, I think I said that wrong. Anyway, the point is that once you go into the arena of reporting from the Middle East with that prior belief as that's your job, then it's going to be next to impossible for you to adequately do the fact-checking, the research, and the journalism necessary to report accurately on the conflict. I think it is a facile way of looking at things. It's not true. You know, Jews represent 0.2% of the world population, 2% of the American population. The idea that Jews have now become the behemoth, become the powerful, and that the role of the media is to hold them accountable, I think in and of itself is anti-Semitic, but you can't understand that unless you understand the role that these radical ideologies like critical race theory, critical social justice play in kind of inculcating the media with these with this simple good and evil paradigm.
And do you see that reflected in the UK media? You mentioned the cartoon of Sharon by The Independent. So do you see that over and over in the UK media?
Absolutely. And there was another cartoon in The Guardian in 2014 during Operation Pillar Protective Edge, I guess it was, showing Bibi Netanyahu, who was then Prime Minister, holding, as if he was a puppeteer in his hands, miniature puppets of Tony Blair and then Foreign Secretary William Hague. You know, as if the reason why they were supporting Israel in that war against Hamas was because that this Jewish leader was controlling non-Jewish politicians. Again, it goes into the Jew as the powerful, Jew as, you know, it's turning Jewish success around, right? It's making it something that Jews are supposed to be feeling ashamed of, and thereby evoking classic anti-Semitic tropes about Jewish power. So you can't understand media coverage of Israel unless you understand that Jews and Israel is seen as the powerful and that Palestinians are seen as the weak, and that colors almost everything.
Joanna, you seem to have a real handle on how to present a positive message and get good results. How would you advise, you know, reporters, media, to maybe change the perception of what Israel is really like and the Jewish people?
So I think really it's all about telling the story of the Israelis as opposed to telling the story just of Israel. The human stories that you can find here that you know that can touch your readers, and the storytelling capabilities is what will cause, I know at least from my perspective, sort of the younger they are, the less, obviously they don't necessarily read newspapers so much, they're already on just the digital media. If there's a way to bring in aspects of Israel that are not only connected to what used to be the way we would tell the stories from Israel, whether it's the Holy Land or the political issues, then that is the best way to bring people into the conversation. I think that I know that there's the Jerusalem Press Club, for example, that is based in Jerusalem and invites, you know, the foreign press corps that's here to actually discover other aspects of Israel. So they're here to write about the conflict, but they take them off to discover about sustainability and food and different aspects of what's going on here in the country. The more that people understand that Israel is a real, thriving, vibrant country, which is fun and interesting and has many issues that are not necessarily positive, but also many issues that are very positive, as told through the stories of the Israeli people, I think is a very good way to get people more interested.
Yeah, we talked to some of the people here last night, and the theme was that being here in Israel, you really have a sense of what it's really like, and as opposed to what the perception is back in their home country.
Yeah, definitely. Yeah. And you know, being here in Israel and what it's really like, it's really those moments in between all the serious conversations that we have where you discover the beauty and the vibrancy of Israel. And I think those are the pieces that are missing. It's like a puzzle that has missing pieces where we know all the serious stuff, we've got the frame together, but the little pieces that we can fill in and make it more colorful and more relevant to what is trending right now on global topics. Israel is a global leader in many areas which people have no idea about. We the Israeli people, talk about us being a startup nation and our technology prowess, but if you're not in that field and you're not in high tech, most people actually don't know Israel is so successful. If it can be brought to people's attention, in between telling the stories that you want to tell, I think that will add more people into you know, the audience that you're trying to reach.
Yeah. Itamar, how can people get the news about what's the bad kind of perspective of what's happening here in the land?
Well, first, everybody, I ask you all to go to our website, palwatch.org, and then sign up there to get our newsletter. You'll get this information, and then what I ask you to do, and we have groups around the world that do this, is create media groups where you will send this to journalists. As we can't reach every journalist, but you can reach your own journalists. You can say, listen, I read your column every day, and you missed this completely. I'd like to meet with you and show you some material. There are media groups in different countries that actually do this. They go and they meet with the journalists, sit them down, show them our videos. What we do is we make available our entire presentation, not just this presentation on WAD, but our entire presentation, one that I've recently been given. I recently, 2 weeks ago, gave it in German Parliament, before that in Norwegian Parliament. The entire presentation we make available to anyone who wants, the students around the world. I would say anyone here in this group who wants our presentation or knows someone who might want it, please write to us. We'll send it to you, and then you can actually go out and impact on the media. If you have contacts in your governments, with your local members of parliament, go to them as well. Become a magnifier for these messages. There's hardly a journalist or an MP in the world who could listen to that video that I just described to you about Jews being hominides and not be outraged at the Palestinian Authority. Well, why don't you all go onto our website or write to us? We will send that to you as a document. You can then go and meet with a journalist, show them and say, how can you not publicize this story? This is outrageous. This is an advisor to Mahmoud Abbas. Why don't you do it? So what I ask everybody is partner with us, join with us. Let's go on this fight, because the material is all available. We need as many partners as we can to win. Our website address again, palwatch.org. Thank you.
Yeah. Adam and Joanna can tell us how people can reach you, and tell us in summary, Adam and Joanna, and then Itamar, what's the main message you want to communicate today?
I'll go backwards. The main message I want to communicate today is that it isn't just a matter of narratives, that there are such things as facts, there are such things as truth, there are such things as falsehood. The job of journalists is to write factually accurate reports about Israel. The job of those of us who support Israel and those of you who want to fight for Israel is to hold journalists responsible towards their own ethical standards, their own standards that purport to abide by professional rules of journalism, such as accuracy, checking sources, not conflating fact with opinion, so that it isn't just a matter of competing narratives, it's a matter of right and wrong, truth and falsehood, and that the one thing that CAMRA does each and every day is that we reach out to journalists and editors and we hold them accountable to their own standards. So that you can contact us, go at camera.org, and you can become a member of CAMRA. And we have a very large active letter writing team. We send out alerts to members, and we give them the facts in which they can craft their own message to media outlets, asking editors, say at the LA Times or The Guardian, to please correct an article, and we give you the facts necessary so that you can write in your own words what to ask for. We're also very active on Twitter, on Facebook, and Instagram. So follow us, and by all means, but more than follow us, don't just be passive. Become an active member of our community. Push back against falsehoods, push back against inaccuracies, and push back against anti-Semitism. Thank you.
So what my main message here today, I think, is sometimes you look at positive content and you think it's nice, but let's deal with the issues, the serious issues first. And the reason why I do what I do is that I personally, as a mother of children that I'm raising here in Israel, and our donors from abroad are very worried, actually not for now, but for the future. And what they're concerned about is the future of Jewish peoplehood, because the next generation of Jews is losing their connection with Israel. And the same is happening in the Christian community. Next generation, young Christians are losing their connection. They're being pulled into another conversation about human rights and so on, relating to Israel, and that's all they can see and all they're taking in. And that is a real concern, not just for the Jews amongst us, but for the Christian community as well. And if you want to make sure that your next generation stays connected to Israel for all the right reasons, you've got to give them the reasons why. And so for media, if you're looking for content that is relevant for young people, very kind of happy kind of peppy kind of stuff, you can go to our website. It's vibeisrael.com, and on our website there's a blue button called Israel Toolbox. You click on there, and there's images, links to articles that have been written about Israel from the positive and inspiring sort of perspective, a bunch of links to other online platforms where you can get information from and help disseminate that information. This is content that should be read by young Christian and Jewish kids who are really moving away. It's a great, great concern. So I'm not talking about today. We can try and fix it today. But in 50 years' time, my donors are concerned that their Jewish grandchildren might not stay Jewish. And for your perspective, your Christian sort of devout and connected young people may not maintain that connection. Israel is central to that. And so we need to give them a good reason why.
First of all, I have to say that Joanna's inspiring, and I agree with every word that she's saying, not 100%, but 1,000%. The beauty of Israel and the wonderful sides of Israel, I wish I was working on that every day. It's fantastic, and it has to get out there. With that, I will also say that if we go on a campus or if we go to governments and we say, did you know that Israel created the cherry tomato? We created the camera that you're helping when you have a colonoscopy. Did you know we did all the... And they'll say, yeah, but why are you killing Palestinians? In other words, it can't stand by itself. We have to also come to them and say all of this negativity that you're getting about Israel, it's all false. We've been doing a lot of reporting lately on this issue of dead Palestinian children. There have been, this year has almost a record number of dead Palestinian children. We just produced a report 2 weeks ago. The title of the report was, and it's a video report, you should all get it on our website. The report is titled, Why is the Palestinian Authority Killing Its Own Children? Why and how is the Palestinian... And the conclusion of the report is that they find that they can get the UN to condemn us, an international community to condemn us when their own children are killed. So they convince their children to be martyrs. The children go out to be martyrs. And then when they're killed, they come to the international community and say, look, we have dead children, Israel's killing them. We've created a new hashtag just a couple of days ago, which we're releasing actually, we released yesterday, which is called Save Palestinian Children from Their Leaders. And we think that everybody should use that hashtag. That's the message. So I said, again, people will love Israel because of the material that Joanna is presenting, but we also can't have them, we have to stop them from hating Israel because of false beliefs, and that's the role that PMW is playing in the world. And like I said, all of you join us and help us win that fight. Thank you.
It's complementary. Yeah.
I think we may have time for one or two questions. Yeah. Okay.
Thank you. My name is Haroon Ibrahim. I'm from here. I'm Jerusalemite from Abu Ghosh. I'm the director of the Al Hayat channel, the Christian Arabic channel, 24/7. At the same time, I'm the chairman of the board of Communio Messianica, that is a Muslim background believers in the Messiah around the world. And we're condemning anti-Semitism and Holocaust denial. That's ridiculous. And we would love to hear, just like your opinion of how can your organizations help the Arab people who really love Israel and want to be there and help. And we really want to do a lot of things to help in that, because the Arabic world is really forgotten in this issue.
Well, I just want to reiterate that we have I just wanted to reiterate, to directly answer your question, that we have an active Arabic department. So we have an Arabic website where we publish articles about anti-Israel and anti-Semitic content in the Arabic media. We have a Twitter, we tweet in Arabic, and we have a Facebook post in Arabic. So we are extremely active in the Arabic language. And we have Arabic researchers that look at Arabic media 24/7.
Yes, yeah. The only thing is that you are tagged as an Israeli. So the Arab media that so-called looked not Israeli, but then helped Israel. That's what I'm talking about. Your
I comment on this as well.
tagged as an Israeli. So
Yeah, Haroon's point is that it's coming from an Israeli label, I guess. Go ahead.
Yes, I agree with you completely that that is a problem. There are, I wouldn't say a lot, there are a number of Palestinians who've been working with Palestinian Media Watch for a number of years. These are people who I've met in various circumstances, in meeting groups between Israelis and Palestinians. Some of them became very active. One of them has met with me a number of times with foreign members of parliaments who visited Israel, and then he will soon be traveling with me to foreign parliaments. These are Palestinians, one of them who grew up in, and still actually lives in a refugee camp. And when he met Israelis for the first time, he was sure Israelis were going to kill him, because that's what he had been taught about Israelis. Eventually, he had his wow moment, and he realized his whole life had been a lie. All his beliefs were lies. And he became very active working for peace with Israel, and that's why he works with Palestinian Media Watch. There were others like him, and those Palestinians are now working with us, but they're creating a website which is almost finished. It's not quite finished yet. It's going to have that same name as the hashtag I mentioned, Save Palestinian Children from Their Leaders, Save Our Children from the Leaders. It's going to have testimonies of Palestinians and eventually have leaders around the world. It will have a lot of evidence from PMW. That is a lot of videos where we show how the Palestinian children are being brainwashed to kill themselves. And then the Arabs, Palestinians, are going to respond with their videos that the children have to be saved from this. We have a Bill of Rights for Palestinian children that they wrote. It's going to be very powerful and very important, and it's going to be Palestinians and eventually Arabs, an Arab and Palestinian-run website to expose the tragedy of the Palestinian child that's brought upon by the Palestinian leadership. So it's something that we're working on now. It's not quite final yet, but I hope shortly it will be online, and then this can be a platform. By the way, every Palestinian who speaks there, we hide their face, and we actually change their voice as well. We don't want to endanger anyone's lives. And all they do is talk about how the Palestinian Authority is really poisoning their children, and the world has to protect Palestinian children from their own leaders.
Yeah. David Parsons?
Yeah. David Parsons with the Christian Embassy. This is sort of a follow-up to my Arab Christian brother, that as we get closer to the Christmas season, there always seems to be this media spotlight on the Palestinian community, particularly Bethlehem, and it always seems to get exploited that there's a unique brand of anti-Semitism around Christmas emanating from the Palestinian arena. Itamar, maybe you have some materials, you can let us know about that so we can be prepared for it if our other guests here have, I don't know if Camera has a special section on this. I think Itamar does. He's collected specific things around anti-Semitism, anti-Israelism connected with the Christmas season.
I'll just give you a couple of examples that repeat almost every year. Is that Israel, there are cartoons every year of Israel killing Santa. There are cartoons every year, well, I wouldn't say every year, but often, cartoons or statements that Israel killed the Palestinian Jesus. Jesus is presented as a Palestinian. He's also presented as a Muslim. He's also presented as the first martyr, the first Palestinian martyr. So all of this, it's not only hateful anti-Semitism, but it's also it's hateful of Christianity to say that Jesus is a martyr, a shaheed, which means, the way they define it, that means he's in paradise with 72 virgins. That's how they define the shaheed. So it's insulting to everyone, and we'd be very happy to give you a collection of this material that you can be ready. So be in touch with me right after.
I think it's a tragedy that the spotlight is on the Palestinians and somehow they use it to just trash Israel. That's the tragedy of it.
I think we have one more question, Hadassah.
Thank you very much. My name is Reverend Dennis Ntumbi, Israel Allies Foundation, Director of Africa. I feel that there's a need and a necessity to do a campaign on the truth against the disinformation, misinformation, and malinformation towards Israel. And essentially the militarization of global attitudes towards Israel. Misinformation and disinformation has been, of course, the thing that kills, because you're mobilizing the world against a society and legitimizing that they shouldn't exist because they are not for the good of the nation. So there's need for a concerted effort. We're struggling with the Africa Union environment because, of course, there has been a lot of, a doctrine legitimizing, trying to legitimize Israel as an apartheid state. But one of the things you really may not find is a repository that you can draw the truth to contest that position. You almost have to come here and try to dig and try to dig. So there's need for a concerted effort to ensure that the truth is actively available from a campaign perspective to delegitimize a lot of these mobilization of attitudes towards Israel. So I think that's one of the things that needs to be achieved, so that it will be easy to counter a lot of these with the truth.
Joanna, you want to address that?
Yeah, I actually wanted to say earlier about the Arab community, that whenever we do a trip to Israel, we always include people from the Arab community, because it's important in terms of diversity to show that Israel isn't just Jewish or just Christian. There's a very strong Arab, Muslim, and Christian community here, and it's important to see it. The content that we create and generate actually doesn't appear on our website. So this is for you, the journalist from Al Hayat, I think this is for you, yeah. So the content, you said, because we're called Vibe Israel, so that's a problem for you. Yeah, but the people that we bring, the influencers that we bring, sometimes have millions of followers, 500,000 followers. The posts that they post are on their platforms, not ours. So if you follow us at Vibe Israel, everything that they post, we post from their trip here. And then if you can promote it from their website, not us. You don't need to link it to us. You can link it to them, telling stories about the Arab community in Israel, the Christian Arab community in Israel. We always include something about that. So that can help, I hope, your effort. And in terms of a campaign to talk about, or create basically a repository of information, there's a joke about Jews that you put 2 Jews in the room and you get 3 opinions. There are about 4,000 organizations that are doing this work. Everybody has some form of a repository, but nobody is collating everything. And I agree with you wholeheartedly. I think that's the role of our government. And I think that that's one of the things that they need to do. A campaign is fine. It just needs to be targeted. One of the things that it's important for me, very important to say, is that I would not go to somebody who feels very strongly about the Israeli-Palestinian conflict and talk to them about cherry tomatoes. Okay, that's not a conversation that I can have with them. Just like if someone's really interested in fashion, talking to them about the conflict in Israel is going to be a dud. So when you do any kind of campaign, you need to make sure that it's targeted to people who are interested in the content of the campaign. Not everyone is interested in everybody's delegitimizing Israel campaign. So we need to be careful about who we bring it to, because sometimes we're the ones who are creating awareness of the negative things that are being said about us. Sometimes it's us that's pouring the fuel on the BDS fire. We need to be careful about that as well.
Yeah. I know we're out of time, but I want to end with a statement by Robert Stearns, Bishop Robert Stearns, who addressed us last night and had the eloquent conversation whereby David Rosen, and he put this out a few days ago. It says, to our Jewish friends, which just shows how sobering and how dangerous this subject is. We cannot imagine what it is like for you, a generation after the Shoah, the Holocaust, to be witnessing the rise of blatant lies, fabrications, and irrational and insane anti-Semitism that we are all seeing and hearing on an almost daily basis. We want you to know this: never again is not just a slogan for us. It is a commitment, and we will live up with our very lives and breath. Wherever a Jew stands, there we stand. Millions and millions and millions of us, and I believe many representing here today. Your people shall be our people, your God shall be our God. We want you to know this. We will not be silent. We will raise our voices in every aspect of the public discourse in defense of the truth. An attack on the Jewish people is an attack on all peoples, all minorities. Justice and righteousness demand that we raise our voices and raise them we shall. We want you to know this, you are not alone. Millions and millions of us stand with profound respect and appreciation for the epic story of the Jewish people and your countless contributions to humanity throughout history in our modern day. And I thought that's a fitting conclusion to our conversation. And I wanted to thank Adam and Joanna and Itamar for a great conversation. And we'll all be available to any questions after this. And I believe we're having a coffee break.
Thank you. Thank you. We will have now a 10-minute coffee break outside. You have some refreshments and coffee outside, and we'll be back here at 4:15. Let's try not later than that for the next part of our schedule.
Sail away with me, honey. Put my heart in your hand. Sail away with me, honey. Now, now, now. Sail away with me. What will be, will be. I wanna hold you now, now, now. Crazy skies are wild above me now. Winter howling at my face, and everything I held so dear disappeared without a trace. Oh, all the times I tasted love.
the sun in his jealous sky as we walk in fields of gold. So she took her love for to gaze a while upon the fields of barley. In his arms she fell as her hair came down among the fields of gold. Will you stay with me? Will you be my love among the fields of barley? We'll forget the sun in his jealous sky as we lie in fields of gold. See the west wind move like a lover's soul upon the fields of barley. Feel her body rise when you kiss her mouth among the fields of gold. I never made promises lightly, and there have been some that I've broken. But I swear in the days still left, we walk in fields of gold. We walk in fields of gold.
Attention Merck, les labels.
Many years have passed since those summer days among the fields of barley. See the children run as the see the crystal raindrops fall, and the beauty of it all is when the sun comes shining through to make those rainbows in my mind. When I think of you sometime, and I want to spend some time with you, just the two of us. We can make it if we try, just the two of us. Just the two of us, building castles in the sky, just the two of us, you and I. We look for love, no time for tears. Wasted water's all that is, and it don't make no flowers grow. Good things might come to those who wait, but not for those who wait too late. We gotta go for all we know. Just the two of us. We can make it if we try. Just the two of us. Just the two of us. Building them castles in the sky. Just the two of us. You and I. I hear the crystal raindrops fall on the window down the hall, and it becomes the morning dew. And darling, when the morning comes and I see the morning sun, I want to be the one with you. Just the two of us. We can make it if we try. Just the two of us. Just the two of us, building big castles way on high. Just the two of us, you and I. Just the two of us. Just the two of us. Let's get it together, baby. Just the two of us. Just the two of us.
She's in me, always with me, tiny dancer in my hand. Jesus free.
Test 1, check. Hey, test.
Turning back, she just laughs. her songs, the words she knows, tune she hums. But oh, how it feels so real, lying here with no one near, only you, and you can hear me when I say it softly, slowly. Hold me closer, tiny dancer. Count the headlights on the highway. Lay me down in the sheets of linen. You had a busy day today. Hold me closer, tiny dancer. Count the headlights on the highway. Lay me down in sheets of linen. You had a busy day today. Blue jean baby, LA lady, seamstress for the band, pretty eyed, pirate smile. You marry a music man, ballerina. You must have seen her dancing in the sand. Now she's in me, always with me, tiny dancer in my hand. Oh, how it feels so real, lying here with no one near, only you, and you can hear me when I say softly, slowly. Hold me closer, tiny dancer. Count the headlights on the highway. Lay me down in sheets of linen. You had a busy day today.
I'm here in Ukraine on the Russian border. Holocaust survivors in Ukraine are in a state of total panic because they believe there's going to be a Russian invasion. Everything possible is being done to destabilize the country right now. I can tell you that personally. I've been here in the trenches. Russia is close to completing preparations for what appears to be a large-scale invasion and launch a humanitarian crisis.
This is a village that doesn't exist anymore, but some of the people are still here.
A few months ago, you couldn't turn on a TV without hearing some update about how bad things are here. But as often happens, once it's off the front page, we forget about the ongoing humanitarian crisis. I'm here to tell you the situation here is as heartbreaking as it has ever been. Half of Ukraine's infrastructure has been destroyed by this conflict. That means millions of people don't have homes, and millions more will be without any kind of heat this winter, and it gets cold in Ukraine. Imagine, if you can, what it would be like to hear bombs going off day and night, with your electricity shut off and no access to food. The elderly are the ones who are most affected. They're living wherever they can find shelter, often in church basements. I knew that we had to do something to help them. Last time I was here, I really felt God tell me to buy some generators for these churches of refuge. We delivered trucks full of generators so the churches would be prepared. Right after we got them installed, the entire eastern side of Ukraine lost power. It's because of your help that we're able to hear God and obey and see His plans fulfilled. Ukraine is home to over 400,000 Jews, including many Holocaust survivors. The Jerusalem Prayer Team has been ministering to them for over a decade. We've been bringing life-saving food to these precious Jewish survivors for months now. But now we need to get food to these churches who are providing shelter for these cold and displaced refugees. For months now, we have had convoys heading directly into the war zone to provide food not only for Jews, but also for Christians who are starving. Since the war began, we have driven 20-ton trucks filled with food in some of the worst hit areas. We've made that trip 74 times, delivering over 3 million pounds of food. But there's so much more we need to do to make sure these desperate people survive the harsh winter.
То без помощи, ну никак. Мы не знаю, как бы были. Я не знаю. Спасибо, спасибо. Спасибо, спасибо.
And I'm looking forward to joining you in this next series of special guests. For many of us, figuring out what we'll do tomorrow is a hard enough task. So let's try envisioning 2 decades from now. Where will Israel be in 2050? Might I add in a small side note, may we all merit to live to see Israel in 2050. The video we just saw was produced by our first speaker, who will elaborate on the humanitarian perspective of this issue. I'd like to welcome I'd like to welcome Michael Evans II, President of the Friends of Zion Museum and the Jerusalem Prayer Team.
Thank you so much. Precious. It's a real joy to be with you guys today. Many of you I've followed as I have worked in the country over the last decade, and I'm a big fan. And so it's good to be here with you. And selfishly, well, it's just great to be in Israel right now. I've spent the last months, thank you. I've spent the last months in and out of Ukraine, and most of my preaching, most of my teaching, most of my speeches during this time have been, well, in the war zone there. And so artillery fire,
blackouts. That's kind of been the norm for me over this last year. And it's so great to be here. This feels like such a shining example of what's possible. And when they asked me to talk about the humanitarian perspective, I really felt just uniquely equipped. You know, maybe if you had asked me a year ago, I wouldn't have felt that way. But today I did. And so I'd love to share something with you that I believe the Lord has put on my heart, and I hope that he puts it on your heart as well. You know, we've been working here. I've been working here in the country for a decade, and my father for 5 decades combating anti-Semitism. We've been doing that through preaching. We've been doing that online, through prayer, through messages. I would host, especially during COVID, a lot of online prayer sessions that would sometimes get millions of views. And the theme, outside of just the spiritual theme, the practical theme, was really to fight and to combat anti-Semitism. We're all excited about that. We all feel and know the importance of it. But maybe we don't really realize how God's people perish for lack of knowledge. You know, that was a word that was used in the Bible for a specific time, for a specific context, but I think that it applies to our world today as well, doesn't it? God's people, the Jewish people, suffer tremendously because of our lack of knowledge. Historically, and even today. And so we've made it our cause to continue to educate, to continue to work, be it at the Friends of Zion Museum. Many of you have probably been there before. If you haven't, go, tell them I sent you. They'll roll out the red carpet, okay? Please. But also through education with our Ambassador Project. Educating young people to be ambassadors for the nation of Israel. To be people who go home wherever they're from and combat anti-Semitism there. To be people who understand the calling of the Jewish people, who love the nation of Israel. It's powerful. And we continue to innovate in that way so that these individuals will be lights in the darkness. We don't want ignorance and a lack of knowledge on our part to hurt them. And in this world today, with so much lies online, so much ignorance on television, it is our job more than ever, our responsibility, all of our responsibilities, to be those educators, to be those people who inspire the future generation, to stand up and to say, Haneni, here am I, God. But why? You know, as a pastor's kid, I was always obsessed with that question. More than any other question. Not who, what, or where. Why? Years ago, when me and my dad were talking, he said, I'm going to build a museum in Jerusalem. Why? I want to know why. Let's get down to the real reasons. You know, there's a lot of people that would say, okay, Christianity has its roots in Judaism. We understand the draw to the nation of Israel. But why be Christian Zionists? Why be people like these people that you see in the Friends of Zion, like the Ten Boom family, who literally gave their lives for the Jewish people? Many of you know the story. Casper Ten Boom was there in his clock shop in Haarlem, Holland. And as an old man, an old respected man in his community, everybody knew what he was doing. They knew that he was hiding Jews, that he was saving Jewish lives. And the Nazis even came to him. And they said, you know what, old man, if you promise that you'll bring in no other Jews, we'll let you live. You can die of old age in your bed. And he said, no. The next Jew that knocks on my door, I will gladly bring in. It would be my honor to give my life for God's chosen people. Imagine that level of commitment. He wasn't risking his life. He was risking his children's too. Betsy died in Ravensbrück. Corey suffered tremendously. Imagine that level of commitment. You don't do that because you are bartering with God for a blessing. You do it for one reason. One word. Hesed. Love. You do it for love. It was for the reason of Zion that I went to Ukraine for the first time. We started a small work there, just helping some small Jewish communities in Ukraine around Kyiv with food, some basic things. And I would go, I'd visit with them every once in a while. It wasn't a very big project. And then I ended up there a couple weeks before the war started. And I realized this is about to be a storm that nobody can imagine. The fear was palpable. You could feel it in the atmosphere. I would meet with these Holocaust survivors, and they would tell me, you know, the Russians came before. Why are they coming again? They had gone from the atrocities of the Holocaust to oppression under the USSR. And then their thinking was, they're coming back for me. I'm looking at the TV and Biden's telling me to get out. All Americans leave. So I do. Shortly after that, me and my dad, we brought a truckload, 20 tons of food and medicine across the border. We were really proud of ourselves. We patted ourselves on the back. We celebrated. And the Lord stopped my celebration. Because I sat there with all of that food and all that medicine. And I thought, how do I know if that woman that shared that with me is going to get any of this? I don't. She's alone in her home outside of Kyiv. And I have no guarantee that she's going to see any of this food. And so on my heart, God told me to go. Bring it. Deliver it yourself. And that's what I did. You know, I found a woman there, one of our community members, that had been bedridden since the war began. Couldn't leave her bedroom. Couldn't leave the bed that she was laying in. So afraid. And you have to understand, the beginning part of the war was chaos. I was there outside of Kyiv, bombs going off nonstop. You don't know where the Russians are. They can be around any corner. I go to the line there on a foggy day and turn the corner and I hear gunshots, and then going past the side of my head. And have to work my way around. She's terrified. She's laying in her bed. And the only thing that I can do
is pray for her and bring her this food and bring her this medicine and let her know that people love her and are standing with her. Even after all of those Jewish people that I had been there to support had left, I continued to go back. I couldn't stop myself. I'm going back in 2 days. I get to be Santa Claus. I'm bringing a truckload of toys to some children that are too poor to leave. Why? Hesed. The power of Christian Zionism is loving a people that is outside of yourself. They're different from your tribe, but you love them as if they're your own people. And it becomes such a powerful thing that you would risk your life for this family that isn't yours. You would stand in the gap for them. Hesed. Hesed means unconditional love in English. It gets translated in our Bible as unconditional love, brotherly love, all of these different love words. But it is so much deeper than any of that. You could write books on the idea, on the depth of this Hebrew word, of this Hebrew principle that the church in the West so desperately needs to grab a hold of with both hands. It's not love turned inward. It's love turned outward. Hesed. When you hesed somebody, you feel their pain in your guts. Down in your core. If you have a child and you've seen your child go through heartache or heartbreak and it's hurt you down to your core, that is hesed. That's the nature of what Christian Zionism should be. And when we grab hold of that, it changes everything. I don't go to Ukraine in spite of being a Christian Zionist. I do it because I am. Because I know what it's like to love a group of people. To stand in the gap for them. To pray for them. To risk for them. Hesed is God's most descriptive character. And it should be ours as well. I love you, and God bless you.
Thank you, Michael. This next topic is especially relevant to all the women in the audience, since our next guest will be tackling exactly that issue. I'd like to discuss the issue of the Christian women's perspective in Israel 2050. I'd like to welcome Dr. Ruth Pauline Plummer, President and CEO of the Covenant Daughters Television Network. Please.
Well, good evening, everyone. How are you? I hope you all are doing well. We are enjoying the Christian Media Summit. How many of you all are enjoying the summit thus far? Oh, now you all can do better than that. Put the hands together. Well, my name is Dr. Ruth Pauline Plummer, and I am the CEO and founder of Covenant Daughters Television Network, a network created by women for women. Covenant Daughters Television Network is a faith-based television platform with the cutting-edge ability to deliver quality programming locally, nationally, and globally. I am honored, even though I got a tall task tonight, I am honored and humbled to have the opportunity to speak to you on behalf of women in media. I want to thank you, Nitsan Ken, Hadassah Swartz, and the GPO team for your gracious invitation. I am so thankful tonight, and I feel truly blessed to have two men present that if it wasn't for them, I wouldn't be standing here. That is none other than my amazing husband, the love of my life, and my partner, one who has one of the fathers of Christian Television Network, Bishop Glenn Plummer, and Greg West of WATC Television 57 of Atlanta, Georgia, where I began my career in television over 25 years ago. He is here tonight, and I'm so grateful. And to every participant, to every television executive, journalist, radio and newspaper editor, and roles that are not named, thank you for all that you do to continue to tell God's story. God's story is about Israel, a land about which God says uniquely, prophetically, and repeatedly in the Bible, "This is mine." God refers to Israel as he does to no other land on earth. He raises Israel to be a light to the Gentiles. God chose Israel for a purpose, to reveal his power, his faithfulness, and loving kindness to all the earth. And God promises Israel a specific land, and we know it as the promised land. The Lord said he would bring his people to the land he chose, and he would make their descendants prosperous. And here we are, coming up on the 75th anniversary of Israel's existence, the diamond year. And we are all here tonight because we stand with solidarity and support for the Jewish state and commemorate Israel's historic accomplishments. These historic achievements bear witness of God's covenant with Israel and mankind, that his covenant still stands today as it did thousands of years ago. This is God's story. This is God's story. Christian media tells God's story. Television is simply what it means, exactly what it says. Tell a vision. Christian media tells God's vision. For thousands of years, women have been inspired by the timeless tales of individual portraits of various women in the Bible, in which Christian women have come to understand what it means to be a woman of faith and have learned valuable lessons as wives, mothers and daughters, victors and victims, women who change the course of important events, and women who are powerless to affect even their own destinies. The Bible introduces to us many women like Eve, the mother of creation, Sarah, the mother of many nations, Hannah, Rachel, the mother of all Israel, Deborah, Esther, Ruth, Mary, the mother of Jesus, Mary Magdalene, Elizabeth, etc., whose lives teach us valuable lessons. Many are a fine example to imitate, but as we say in the South, Others provide warning examples, like Jezebel and Delilah. But I stand here before you tonight as a witness to the impact those Bible stories have on a woman of destiny. My grandmother introduced me to these stories, these Bible stories, and the God of these Bible stories from a very, very young age. You see, every morning before we would, when we would be up getting ready for school, getting dressed for school, I would hear my grandmother in the kitchen making that wonderful oatmeal with raisins and cinnamon and nutmeg. I could smell it before I got there. But before you were going to get your physical meal, you were going to get your spiritual meal. You were going to read the Bible, and you were going to pray. And I'll never forget, my grandmother had ordered these encyclopedias. And so back in that day, the salesman would come to your house and make the deliveries, and the sales as well. Well, this particular day, the salesman came to the house to deliver the encyclopedias that my grandmother had ordered for us because she was a believer in education. And he said, you know, when he came to the door, we all ran as little children behind her to the door. And he said, Mary, yes, so you figured it out. I'm from the South, right? He says, Mary, I got these encyclopedias for you, but you know, I know how you like to read those grandchildren of yours, that good old Bible. And so I brought some a Bible story encyclopedia that I thought you might like. And so my grandmother said, well, let me look and let me see them. And so he laid it out, and I mean, I'm telling you, pictures, illustrations. I mean, we got really excited because we had just been reading the text, but now we got to see pictures. And so my grandmother said, well, how much are these encyclopedias? And he said, oh, don't you worry about it. What you got, just give me whatever you have. Because Mary, I know you love to teach those children. No, he didn't say children, children, the Bible. And so whatever you got, you give it to me. And my grandmother got those Bible story encyclopedias for us. And oh boy, we were in for a journey for real. And so what I learned through those colorful pictures and illustrations that made me so happy as a child became my anchor as an adult. And I began to understand that women in Bible history have played a variety of roles in the life of the church and in the world. And in God's story of redemption throughout Scripture, they contributed to God's powerful work in the world and the advancement of his kingdom. The founding matriarchs are mentioned by name, as are some prophetess, judges, herons, and queens, while the common woman is largely, though not completely, unseen. The New Testament refers to a number of women in Jesus' inner circle and names women in position of leadership in the early church as well. While women were not generally in the forefront of public life in the Bible, those women who are named are usually prominent for reason outside the ordinary. So I'm simply saying to you tonight that these women were extraordinary women. For example, they are often involved in the overturning of human power structures in a common biblical literary device. Abigail, David's wife, Esther, the queen, and Jael, who drove a tent peg into the enemy's commander's temple while he slept, are a few examples of the women who turned the tables on men with power. Views of women in the Bible have changed throughout history. These strong women in the Bible held the line of faithfulness. These biblical women represent not only the kind of bravery to which all Christians are called to be in the face of suffering, but represent a uniquely powerful purpose which God has designated for women to achieve God's plan, which would otherwise be impossible. Times may have changed, but the examples of these faithful biblical heroes still shine and shine throughout women today. With over 25 years in Christian televisions, I have come to know that media, especially television media, is very important to this generation. The media plays a very important role in ensuring the societal norms, ideologies, and customs are disseminated. Socialization has been made possible and much simpler because of media. Through socialization, different societies are able to share languages, traditions, customs, roles, and values. And so, therefore, the number of women in Christian media must increase, and more should be done to present women in media as leaders and role models to the next generation of young women. We are to continue to tell Israel's story, to strengthen women with the stories that have strengthened us. We must take a close look at where we stand today. The women of old, God wrote his story through their lives, a story of hope. And today, he is still writing lives through women all over, even the women in this audience. And we can tell the story. As I hear the echo of the cries out for our children who are falling away, whether Jew or Christian, all around the world. You know the answer? We need to tell them the story. We need to tell them God's story. We need to tell them Israel's story. We need to tell them that God is still alive. And the covenant God who is with Israel is still with them today. And all you have to do is come and see. Come and see. Israel is small, but Israel has a big God who is standing by them. And we love him. And he is the same today, yesterday, and forevermore. And he is still telling his story. And so I just want to say, if I had to say to the men, and on behalf of the women in media, I would say to you, God said it's not good for you to be alone. So let us help you. Let us stand beside you. We know that things have changed, and so our roles have changed, and we are impacting every sector of society. We are no longer, raising the children and having the children. We're doing that too, but we are bosses. We are employees. We are running organizations. We're sitting in high seats. But I promise you, there is a distinct between a woman of God and a woman of the world. And that is, we know how to be adaptable. We know how to be complete. And we know how to make you complete. There was a commercial that says, I know how to bring home, well, we are in Israel, so we don't eat bacon, okay? But we know how to bring home the meat, fried up in the pan, and never let you forget that you are a man. We are here to rally with you. We are not in competition with men, not godly women. We are in camaraderie. We are your camaraderie. Let us tell the story. We want to save this generation. Let's tell the story of Israel. If we want this generation to know who's the true God, let's tell them the Bible stories. Let's keep those Bible stories before our children, before the camera, before digital media. And I promise you, I guarantee you, our children will know who the true and living God is, the God of Israel. Thank you.
Thank you, Ruth. The next issue to be discussed is relevant to all of you sitting in this room today. What will Israel look like in 2050 through the media perspective? I'd like to welcome Felicia Ferreira, CEO and editor-in-chief of the Swedish daily newspaper Dagen.
Thank you so much. I'm a little bit nervous coming up here since, you know, these wonderful preachers here have just given us beautiful messages. So thank you, Mr. Evans and Dr. Plummer. I really appreciated that. I'm honored and excited to be a part of the 6th Christian Media Summit. It's my first time, so I'm super excited about that. And I wanted to share some reflections from my corner of the world, which is Sweden. So really, you know, up there. And Sweden, rated in the World Values Survey, way up in the right corner, your right side, as extremely individualistic, secularized, and rational. That's us up there. If you haven't seen the map, you know, Google it, look it up. And this means pretty much me, myself, and I. I'm the CEO and editor-in-chief of the Swedish Christian daily newspaper Dagen, as being said, is the biggest Christian newspaper in Sweden, founded 1945, and is the go-to newspaper for religious views and news on society today. And I've been working in the media industry for more than 20 years. So for 2 decades, I've been part of an industry in change. I'm sure all of you have noticed and been in the midst of it as well. From, in my case, a newspaper industry to digitally transformed media houses. I have as well, just to give you a small background on myself, studied journalism, and I have a Master of Science in Business Administration. And for the past 9 years, I've been the head of Dagen. And you know, it's interesting working for a Christian newspaper in one of the world's most secularized countries. While the digital transformation has revolutionized our ways of working, another development has been taking place, as I mentioned, the secularization, and especially in Northern Europe. The new generations are pretty much completely without religious roots whatsoever. In Sweden, only around 15% of the population will say they believe there is a God. Could be compared to, you know, Israeli Jews. I've seen different research on that, different numbers, but anywhere between 50 and 80% will say we believe there is a God. So it's a very small part of the population. And another development parallel to the secularization is an epidemic of mental health issues amongst young people. So the paradox is very clear. These generations have a pretty high quality of life, at least in my country, but seem to have the worst mental health. And in the midst of this, Dagen is operating. And for those reasons, we must always put a lot of thought into what the mainstream narrative and public opinions are, and be able to see where it needs to be challenged. And I'm glad and happy that the Israeli government press office is inviting to these types of events. And as I look through the program, I notice the ambition to broaden the perspectives for us that work in the media industry. I'm not only grateful for that, I think it's necessary for the progress of our understanding of this nation. And had I been better in Hebrew, I would have mentioned your name, because I've heard so many people up here on stage, Mr. Nitzan, I can say like this, but your last name, I need this specific way of saying it. Yeah, I can't, so I'm not going to try, but I'm... Yeah, Mr. Chen. I tried to put it in my speech before, and then I'm like, I'll cross it out. I can't do it. But super appreciative of this beautiful event. And take last night's panel as an example. I have to mention that as well. I very much like the message that Rabbi David Rosen gave us, challenging us, I would say, a lot, not to think of the Jewish people as, these are my words, as, you know, a tool or just part of a bigger plan and a means to something else, but to treat Jewish people as friends, be able to both support but also warn when necessary. And back to media then. When it comes to media coverage in Sweden, you will unfortunately find numerous examples of narrow-minded and agenda-driven perspectives. occasionally, unfortunately, also anti-Semitic, and mainly focused around the conflict between Israel and its neighbors. Now, you will have journalists from the industry disagreeing with me strongly, but let me give you some facts. A few years back, one of Sweden's biggest newspapers, if not the biggest one, published an article stating that the army of Israel was harvesting organs from Palestinian victims. And nothing could, of course, be more false. We recognize the narrative from anti-Semitic propaganda. And in 2015, not that many years ago, the Israeli ambassador to Sweden was asked by public Swedish radio if not the Jews themselves were partly to blame for the growing anti-Semitism in Sweden. Right? Another horrendous example of anti-Semitism in the media narrative. Now, it would not be fair to say that all media in Sweden is biased against Israel, but anti-Semitic figures and proportional critique against Israel happens too often. So, what should then the goal be for the media, as, you know, in painting also the picture of the future of Israel? And a great Swedish journalist, he said this a few years back when it comes to reporting on the politics and the conflict with Israel and Palestinians. If the conflict is a competition of misery and pain, the Palestinians win. And the media has reason for the way they divide their attention. But I find it more serious that the reporters do not manage to make Israel's actions, even when despicable, understandable to the readers. A reader does not just want the reporter to give, you know, good grades for behaviors or bad grades to the different parts. She will also, the reader, want to understand where they are coming from and how they reason. And I think this quote has something to say to both secular as well as Christian media, to reflect upon what it's like for a country as well for a people to live under the constant threat of being wiped out. When it comes to the majority of the Christianity in Sweden, there has historically been a huge interest in and a strong connection to Israel. The big exception, though, is the former state church, the Swedish church, which has a more complicated relation to Israel. But many Christians grew up having, you know, a heart for Israel because of the biblical history as well for Jewish people. It just came with being a Christian. However, and I've heard several speakers mention this already, which makes me happy because I'm thinking, you know, this is something important for the future. This is changing. The new generations growing up in church do not have the same passion for and connection to this country, partly because secularization has also happened within the churches. But they are also more than previous generations basing their commitments on awareness and knowledge. And to a Christian saying, you know, I love and bless Israel, the new generations will ask, why? And they would most likely call it romanticizing Israel if you don't have a proper answer. The new generations might want to show support for suffering amongst Palestinians, and they don't know how to combine supporting Israel with that. So we need to be able to answer the question, why do we stand with and bless Israel? With credible and reliable journalism, we can tell the tale about a country where the Bible comes alive. But I believe we need to do this without romanticizing. Instead, we must educate, and I've heard some other speakers mention this as well, which makes me happy. We need to educate theologically, politically, but also use our journalistic tools to broaden the narrative. Make sure to give readers and viewers a chance to deeply understand where Israel is coming from. In times of change, we cannot take this miracle story for granted. The soon-to-be 75-year-old state of Israel is a miracle, of course, in itself. But another bright point in the history of the Middle East happened recently with, also mentioned by many, the Abraham Accords deals. Deals that normalized the relations between Israel and several Arab countries. I would say that it's a fantastic progress that has been extremely underreported, at least in Western media, considering how important it is for peace in the whole region. So that's just one example of all the things, we should have been able to tell better stories about. Now, these reflections are as much for me and my own publication as for others. So to sum it up, I think our journalistic profession can be a tool to broaden the narrative. But the ambition has to be to give readers and viewers a chance for a deep understanding of where Israel is coming from. This will give new generations arguments, so when they grow up, they also wholeheartedly can say, we stand with Israel. Thank you.
Thank you, Felisa. And now, last but not least, regarding the global perspective of things, I'd like to welcome Jeremy Weber, Director of Christianity Today.
Hello, everyone. It's always a challenge to go last at the end of a long day. So if you fall asleep, I won't take it personally. And also, given the lighting in here, I won't ever know. Also, forgive me, I need to click both the button and my screen. All right. I'm Jeremy Weber with CT, based in Chicago. It's an honor to be speaking here at the 6th Christian Media Summit with 120 delegates from 18 countries. It's also great to be back in Jerusalem, such a remarkable mix of ancient and modern, sacred and secular. Case in point, this photo is of the very first time I came to Jerusalem. I was invited to spend the night inside the Church of the Holy Sepulchre, a rare opportunity to intimately experience such a famous place of pilgrimage. Now, a show of hands, has anyone else done this? Anyone else spent the night in the Holy Sepulchre? Well, I have to be honest, I was conflicted. My wife and I are avid Argentine tango dancers. I've danced in a dozen countries. Jerusalem has only one tango party a month, and it was the same night as my invitation. So I'll leave it to you to guess how I chose to spend the evening. Any guesses? Of course, I chose the church. You have a little faith. So regarding Israel in 2050, you've just heard a humanitarian perspective, a female perspective, and a media perspective. I've been asked to offer a global perspective, so the easiest of the four to summarize in just 10 minutes. A bit of info about my vantage point. I've worked at CT for 15 years, currently direct our expanding non-US and non-English content. Our global media ministry was founded by American evangelist Billy Graham in 1956 to serve Christian thought leaders worldwide. We are best known for a monthly magazine, a daily website, and recently a viral podcast that charted in dozens of nations. Today, a full third of our readers are outside the U.S., and we now publish regularly in 6 languages and are testing more. For those of you observing the liturgical season of Advent, we offer a daily devotional which you can read for free in 8 languages. In recent years, I've attended dozens of global gatherings of Christian leaders, most recently one with 500 evangelical theological educators from 80 nations, representing 200 theological programs. I've personally spoken with hundreds of Christian leaders worldwide and produced thousands of articles that attempt to capture their views on current events. The experience has been a profound encouragement for me and my personal faith, particularly during a season of such polarization in the American church. It's also taught me to have humility when claiming any singular view for the body of Christ worldwide. Last night, Rabbi David Rosen cited the expression, 2 Jews, 3 opinions, and he said it likely applies to Christians as well. After 15 years at CT, I can resoundingly confirm he is right. So, 2050, what will the relationship between Israel and Christians worldwide look like? Last night, Dr. Buehler of ICEJ mentioned his joy at the upcoming 75th anniversary, noting it is the same age as when Abraham went to Canaan. In 2050, Israel will be over 100, the age when Abraham became father to Isaac. What offspring might the Abraham Accords have produced by then? Now, we know the Lord told Jeremiah, "For I know the plans I have for you." And sorry to disappoint, but I'm not a modern prophet. I'm just a journalist, though many of my brethren on Twitter seem to think that they're one and the same. So what I have to offer are a few humble observations of global trends and a few avenues of common cause that Israel could use to stay close to the global Christian community as it diversifies. First, a few qualifications. I will mostly speak from the perspective of a evangelical Protestant Christian. CT is a centered set, not a bounded set. And so while we have a diverse readership, which includes many Catholic and Orthodox readers, as well as many mainline and charismatic readers, I'm conversant in their issues. I read their media regularly. The vantage point I can best offer is a evangelical one from the middle of the Protestant spectrum. I also qualify to speak for myself in my personal capacity and not officially as CT. So 5 brief observations of global trends and how they impact Israel and Christians. Number one, obvious changing demographics. Most of us know this, but it bears repeating. Christianity has dramatically shifted from the global north to the global south, now counting for every 2 in 3 Christians, and from a majority white faith to a majority non-white faith, now counting for 4 in 5 Christians. Its largest language is now Spanish, followed by English, then Portuguese, and very soon Chinese. Evangelicalism itself, which is on this slide, and I know this is a bit small, so I'm happy to provide this to anyone afterwards. Just come get my card. Evangelicalism itself is now almost a majority African faith, as shown here by the Center for the Study of Global Christianity. Research also shows that fertility has bigger impact than conversion. The Pew Research Center predicts by 2060 that Muslims will increase most in births and percentage, nearly equally Christians, while Jews will increase but will remain the same percentage of the global population. This all means the need will be greater than ever for Israel to engage Christians beyond American evangelicals, and for Christians to improve their literacy of Islam and their engagement with Muslims, which they can learn much about from Israel and the wider region. Number 2, changing political contexts. While secularism is on the rise globally, at the same time so is religious nationalism. Think India, for example. Meanwhile, and often related, government restrictions and societal hostilities towards religion have hit record highs in recent years. The Pew Research Center calculates that Christians were harassed in 155 nations in 2020, up from 107 in 2007. Muslims were harassed in 145 nations, up from 96. And Jews were harassed in 94 nations, up from 51. This constrains activities of believers in private and in the public square, including their engagement with Israel when it diverges from local foreign policy or the local mood on the street. Number 3, changing generations. The situation today, broadly speaking, most Christians who are older, white, and more Western remain solidly pro-Israel, due both to theological interpretations, partly because the perception of how to change the world in past decades was to support democracy and free markets, and Israel was a prime example of that. It's remarkable how far this country has come in such a short time, and many see this as a sign of God's providential and restorative work in history. Meanwhile, many Christians who are younger, Christians of color, less Western, are less supportive of Israel, or even unsupportive, partly because of declining religious literacy, and partly because, as anyone who has visited a college campus recently knows, the way to change the world today is social justice, to fight inequalities of power and wealth, to take the side of the marginalized and the oppressed. Thus, a corollary of Israel's remarkable ascendancy in such a short time is fewer now think of its past challenges and more think of its present-day treatment of its minorities, and this complicates their support. Now, as Bishop Robert Stern said last night of evangelical Christianity, whatever that is, it's up for grabs in today's world, I believe is his exact quote. When it comes to U.S. evangelicals, definitions do vary, but the best surveys put them at a full quarter of the U.S. population, meaning there are more liberal evangelicals than American Jews, and consistently find that a third are now people of color. Going global, where 4 in 5 evangelicals are of color, and where many live as minorities, often marginalized or oppressed, their views of Israel become even more complicated. Israel will be wise to ensure that it's not overly focused on American evangelicals as a barometer for evangelical attitudes worldwide. Number 4, changing affiliations. Much attention has been paid to the rise of the nuns, the religiously unaffiliated, soon to be a plurality of Americans. Less attention has been paid to the rise of the non-denominational, now a majority of U.S. Protestants. This complicates the efforts of Israel, or anyone, including me, to widely engage the Christian church because the authority structures and the information pathways keep fragmenting. Another noteworthy change in the Christian world is the significant switch from Catholicism to Protestantism in Latin America, where 3 countries now have Protestant majorities. A few others are close, and even Brazil is projected to follow suit by 2030. Now, evangelicos is a catch-all term for Protestant, and not all are classic quote-unquote evangelicals. But the remarkable surge of Latino charismatics, most of whom are Zionists, has increased regional support for Israel, as shown by Guatemala becoming the first nation after the U.S. to move its embassy to Jerusalem. Yet there also still remains a strong current of liberation theology on the continent, which still requires engagement by Israel as it explains and continues to improve its policies. The 5th one, changing beliefs. The foundation of Christian support for Israel has been changing, as dispensationalism and biblical literacy itself both continue to wane. In a 2021 survey of the theological beliefs of U.S. evangelicals towards Israel, Gray Matter Research created this thought-provoking chart. Essentially, it shows a remarkable split both between who still sees the Jews as God's chosen people today, but also the saliency of supporting them versus other charitable causes. So they found that 31% both see the Jews as God's chosen people and put a high priority on supporting them from a charitable standpoint. 20% do see them as God's chosen people, but do not put a high priority given other charitable causes. 17% do not believe they're chosen, but still put a high priority on supporting them. And 32% do not believe the Jews are God's chosen and do not put a high priority on supporting them. So a complicated landscape to engage. For a global landscape, it gets even trickier. I mean, research has shown that American evangelicals and Christians within Israel are different enough. In 2010, one of the most globally representative gatherings of evangelicals ever took place in Cape Town, South Africa, when 4,000 leaders from 198 nations gathered for the 3rd Congress of the Lausanne Movement. The Pew Research Center happened to survey the attendees and found that more leaders said they sympathized with Israel than Palestinians, 34% versus 11%. But a small majority sympathized either with both equally, 39%, or with neither, 13%. We'll have to wait until September 2024, when Lausanne will hold its 4th Global Congress in Korea, a planned 5,000 leaders from 200-plus nations, to see how those numbers have changed. But while Israel has found ways to receive the support of American evangelicals, today both the motivation and the saliency continue to change, particularly globally, and this requires constant adaptation. Now, 4 broad avenues of common cause for Israel and Christians. Number 1, combating anti-Semitism. Speakers here have rightly bemoaned the rise in anti-Semitism, which has been documented by many observers. I'm confident, looking at our core audience, you won't find many championing such beliefs, and I do see interesting examples of evangelical coalitions forming. Yet, in much of American evangelicalism, there's often a lack of historical consciousness, often almost as if the history of Christianity began with Billy Graham. As our CEO sometimes joke, it's like we went from the Acts of the Apostles straight to the Acts of Billy. We simply haven't viewed ourselves as inheritors of the European tradition of anti-Semitism within Christian circles, because we don't feel historically connected to the European forms of Christianity, even though we certainly are. Thankfully, our concern for anti-Semitism and our efforts to jointly address it are growing, especially in Europe. But I can also say, having observed evangelical debates in the region over some of the more recent efforts to define the problem and unite against it, such as the IHRA definition, that's important to distinguish anti-Semitism from criticism of Israel as a nation-state, as well as to allow for groups to draft their own statements opposing it that address their constituents and their local contexts versus expecting everyone to sign on to the same declarations. The second cause, international religious freedom, known over this part of the world as freedom of religion and belief, FORB. I had the privilege of being a delegate to the first 2 IRF ministerials at the U.S. State Department as an attendee of the 2 IRF summits carried on by civil society. The next one's end of January in D.C., right before our national prayer breakfast. And I encourage you to attend if you want to see an exhilarating multi-faith mix of clergy and civil society. Everyone's a minority somewhere, and persecution and restrictions and social tensions are increasing. We need to stand up for each other, both far away, such as the persecution of Uyghur Muslims in China or of Christians in India, as well as for the freedoms of religious minorities in our own nations. Both of our nations have good records on religious freedom, but we can always improve. A third area of common cause is refugees. Not to intrude on the humanitarian turf of Mike Evans, who spoke before me, but there are currently a record number of forcibly displaced persons worldwide, more than 100 million, according to the UN. I personally visited camps in Iraq, South Sudan, and Somalia, among other nations, and can testify to this tragedy. I've collaborated on the evacuation of religious minorities from Afghanistan and witnessed the mobilization of European churches to receive Ukrainians fleeing war. In the U.S., 6 of our 9 resettlement agencies are faith-based, with the Jewish, evangelical, Catholic, and mainline communities represented, and they account for 70% of resettlement. I've been very impressed with the vast sums of the American Jewish community has raised and donated toward Ukraine, as well as with Israel receiving tens of thousands of Ukrainians. May both of our nations and our faiths continue to better welcome the stranger. And then the fourth one is journalism. To intrude on the turf of Felicia, who spoke before me, on the media perspective, and I guess as the fourth and final speaker, I can take the opportunity to play cleanup. I believe that independent, credible, thoughtful journalism on religion is needed now more than ever. In today's sea of misinformation and lack of media literacy and religious literacy, where everyone is information saturated, time starved, we need to understand each other better, particularly to understand the true motivations of others in their own words, not the straw man arguments presented to us in social media that reward hyperbole and stereotyping and stoke fear and anger. For example, this slide behind me is an internal Facebook study of the top Christian pages on Facebook during a particular time period, and 19 of the 21 were troll farms based in the Balkans. I would even argue that journalism itself is a very biblical profession. If you study it at an evangelical college, you're likely to encounter the idea of the Apostle Luke, author of the book of Acts in the New Testament, as the first journalist, in his effort to write an orderly account of what eyewitnesses had seen and done. Then there's this famous journalism joke: if your mother loves you, check it out. As I-24's Frank Malul said Sunday, it takes a multinational, multilingual, multi-faith media based locally to tell the full story. Our nonprofit media ministry is attempting to transform itself along similar lines to become more of a central nervous system that represents the global body with colleagues from every part of the body, starting with a four-person team in Asia, and Lord willing, expanding to the Middle East next year. All of us can focus on journalistic integrity, covering both sides of an issue accurately and fairly. We can also highlight as many encouraging case studies as we can find. For example, and I apologize, I forgot to pull some slides for these groups, but I can connect to you later. One group I really respect is the Multi-Faith Neighbors Network, convened by an American evangelical pastor, an imam, and a rabbi. They've hosted dozens of retreats around the world where pastors, imams, and rabbis develop relational bonds. I witnessed this in person in Tashkent, Uzbekistan, along with another innovative effort by the Institute for Global Engagement and the Templeton Religion Trust to promote cross-cultural religious literacy among government and civil society. This has been bearing fruit in Vietnam and soon in Indonesia and in Ghana. Meanwhile, the Religious Freedom and Business Foundation just hosted a noteworthy Faith at Work conference in Silicon Valley, providing a place for the rapidly growing employee resource groups focused on faith, which have gained C-suite acceptance for Jews and evangelicals alike to bring their whole self to work in such a secular, liberal environment. We can also listen more locally. That's one reason why at CT we often represent 2 relatively small demographic groups in Israel, Palestinian evangelicals and Messianic Jews. They're the closest to our core audience's theology and the closest of our audience to the land. Now these are 2 groups with vastly different understandings of Israel. They're not often united, but both deserve our hearing of their views in their own words, and allowing their voices to circulate as widely as much larger demographic groups serves the church. We're also working to give equal voice to the MENA region's Arab seminaries, churches, and ministries, as we do American ones, including the forthcoming Arabic initiative. I know I've been blessed by greater access to these leaders, and we expect that our readers will be likewise. Finally, as Bishop Stern said last night, today we have a tension between social justice Jesus and Trump Jesus, while the Christian world needs to meet the Jewish Jesus in his context. And last night, Rabbi Rosen requested that we Christian media not see the state of Israel and the Jewish people as demigods or as inerrant, but to honor their humanity, to praise when praise is warranted, and to criticize when criticism is warranted. As he said, true friends do not say everything you do is right, caution you when you do wrong. This is a true expression of love. Knowing when to do which, when we cover Israel as Christian media, is a matter of much thought and prayer, particularly from afar. But may we do both well, recalling the words of the prophet Micah, he has shown you, O man, what is good and what the Lord requires of thee, to act justly, love mercy, and walk humbly with your God. Thank you.
Thank you, Jeremy. As this session comes to a close, I'd like to thank my friends at the GPO for this opportunity to hear insightful words from great speakers. It has been my pleasure spending time here with you. I hope you enjoy the rest of this extraordinary summit, and who knows, perhaps now making plans for tomorrow will be an easier task after all.
Thank you, Tzivia, the next generation of the GPO. The last panel, I really become more optimistic about the future of Israel. So thank you, Michael. Thank you, Ruth. Thank you, Felicia, and thank you, Jeremy, very much from the bottom of my heart. Really. Now you have 1 hour break before we are going to meet the mayor of Jerusalem at a special restaurant at the Western Wall that you can see the Western Wall and you can feel the spirituality. So the bus moves at 6:30, right? And I still have 2 or 3 volunteers that after the dinner and after the mayor says some remarks, I need to find 2 or 3 volunteers that can talk in 2 minutes, a prayer for Jerusalem, a prayer for Israel, that the Western Wall behind you and the spirituality is in your blood. So Johnny Kim already is one of our volunteers. Who next? Lauren? Excellent. One more. Right here. No, right here. 1, 2, okay, we have male, female, male. Okay, Mr. Plummer, thank you very much. So we still have the opportunity for tomorrow night. So the bus moving to the restaurant, 6:30, let's say, 6:45. Thank you very much.